Simon McQuoid's reboot of Mortal Kombat, which is now in theaters and streaming on HBO Max, that offers really serviceable characters, kind of a lackluster narrative. But my God, is this movie bloody and gory and relentless. Like, it's not so much realistic, but you know what this movie did just to start things off? I'll go to you, Dom.
Yeah.
This movie gave me very big Sam Raimi vibes.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Yeah. I very much just general impressions for me. I actually had a pretty good time with it. Nothing, revelatory, but it did its job pretty damn well. And actually, thinking specifically of the blood, actually Sam Raimi probably is a better comparison. But actually, specifically on the blood and the effects of it, it kind of had like a character, like a uniqueness to itself, in and of itself, because in so many other instances, blood is like so baked in, so whatever. But I am glad that in a Mortal Kombat movie, the blood is so pronounced, so ridiculous, and has like a kind of a personality of its own. It was giving me some like Tom Savini-esque vibes in terms of not. That's
another good name. That's another good name.
Not because it's similar, but just that the way that when Tom Savini does blood, it's very distinct, and you can tell like, damn, that is freaking blood, dude. Now it may not be realistic. It's very bright, very 70s, very of its time, but it develops its own character, and in that way, just the way that the blood in this movie, it's like melted jello, and it's just everywhere, and it's gushing. A lot of it is CG, which is kind of disappointing, but I'd love to know how much exactly. But once you give into that, I mean, hey, all blood in Mortal Kombat video games are CG if you really think about it. But in that sense, it was cool. It was just specifically on that blood part, and I'll toss it back to you.
The best filmmaking in this movie, in my opinion, I think has got to be the opening sequence, which is set in 17th century Japan. And that's where you see the character Hasashi's wife and son are killed. And it's just very dark. It's almost tonally different than the rest of the movie because it's very brooding. It's very serious. And the movie on its own is almost kind of silly, like a silly, gory, hard to medium to hard R rated action movie. And it like almost loses a little bit of steam, I think, like the characters in some way too. Like the characters, we'll get to this too, but might as well touch on it now. Like the opening 15 minutes are very good, and then we kind of just get acquainted with this very bland and uninspired MMA fighter, this Cole Young character.
An original character, I should add. This
character.
This character
he's
is
not in any.
Yeah, it's not like they took an existing character and to make it their own. They actually made up a new one, which I was surprised by, because I was thinking like Cole Young, is that like, did they just change the name of an existing fighter? It's like, I don't recognize any of these. I'm not a big Mortal Kombat dude. I played a few of the games. It's not, again, fighting games are not really my thing. If any fighting game is really going to catch my attention, it's going to be Super Smash Brothers, which is so unique and very not of the grain. That's one of the reasons why it's so popular and famous. But in terms of fighting games, I'm whatever. But I do know the characters of Mortal Kombat, because one of the fun things about fighting games is the character list and just having fun with them. So it's a little disappointing that they went with an original character and they really gave him just a generic story, just like a generic, hey, he's a fighter.
Very generic.
He cares about his family. His daughter inspires him. He loves his wife. And it's like, hey, if this was a boxing or an MMA movie specifically where he rises from the underdog, would be very cliche, but maybe you have some time to develop. But no, the characters here shoot lasers from their arms and their eyes. So yeah, you're going to get overshadowed by that pretty quickly, unfortunately.
And that brings me to my main issue here, is that there's really not much of a reason to rewatch this. And that's not my main issue, but it ties into your take here. This is my main issue, though, with this. This is another case where Hollywood is banking on multiple sequels, as opposed to making sure the first one demands that you be excited for those sequels.
Yeah.
This movie is an origin story. It really is. It's the beginning, it's foundation setting, it's everything. And like even the third act plays a cruel joke in having a Mortal Kombat tournament without having a Mortal Kombat tournament, really. And that's what you want to see. You want to see those rounds. You want to see it kind of play out like it's similarly like it does in the game. And this movie doesn't deliver that in the ending. It's almost like giving you a moral argument for why there shouldn't be Mortal Kombat tournaments. And that's not fun in so many words. And you're banking on it too. We've talked about that Cole Young character not existing previously before this movie. You're banking on this kind of bland archetype to carry this franchise. You're not going to have Johnny Cage in the first one. That's fine. But you're again going down the route. You're running the risk of like what Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles did, the Michael Bay movie, where the first movie was really an origin story. And then nobody showed up for the second movie, which is what everybody was expecting from the first movie. And that's the trouble that they run into with this Mortal Kombat movie is they're trying to trust that fans are going to come out for the next one so you can see what you really wanted to see in the first place. And you get some of it here, but you don't get a lot of it. And what you do get is a lot of development, in my opinion, that it doesn't really have much weight to it. This whole thing feels a little weightless. Where, like, I'm not saying the Anderson movie was perfect, but the Anderson movie, even though it neglected the fatalities, there was enough style and characters to make you want a little bit more. Then you got Annihilation, and everybody was like, fuck that now. We're going to leave this alone for the next 25 years. But point still stands. Anderson didn't even do the sequel. But that's my biggest gripe, though, is it's, again, Hollywood. You'd think they would have learned by now with the Dark Universe. You'd think they would have learned by how many misbegotten franchises that they've bungled in their last 20 years, especially more recently. They would focus on making one great movie as opposed to setting up a damn universe for 4 more movies that might not see the light of day. And that's exactly what this movie tries to do.
You know, I agree, but however, that argument is not as strong as it usually is when we bring it to other movies. For instance, our old pal Scoob, 2020 Scoob, they tried to set up the Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe, which, by the way, I think the new Space Jam is also going to do. The new Space Jam is going to have a Hanna-Barbera cinematic or a Warner Brothers cartoon cinematic universe, because I saw like some Flintstones going on. I'm like, what the hell?
Gonna reopen that portal to hell.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's literally a portal that opens up. But anyway, yeah, it's. I don't think it's as strong of an argument here. Or rather, as strong of a negative, because Mortal Kombat is a fighting game, and it's always been its own shared universe of characters. So when they hint at Johnny Cage at the ending, spoiler, not really, it's like, all right, it's fine. He's another character. And, honestly, I don't think this film could have used another one. Now, could they have made Johnny Cage the main character? Probably, because this guy wasn't really like the actor.
I would have preferred that.
Yeah,
I would have preferred that.
The actor was doing his best, but not really anything to work with, and the melodrama's like, okay, sure, whatever. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see what they could have done. What could they have done in the plot? Because it's very A to B. It's very A to B, and It's a strong. Let me say this: it's a stronger showing than, say. Oh no, I'm not going to go that far. But I will say it's. It's a stronger showing than most. I don't know why I'm thinking this, but Onward, right? Which is a very different movie, but it's got that magic element, and it's trying to, you realize like tried to set up its own world where it's like, hey, here's fairies and magic and all this stuff, but in the real world, and trying to set up its own world, that's trying to make it lived in, but ultimately it just winds up being bland, and it's like, why did this need to be a thing at all? And Mortal Kombat kind of has that thing to it. What could they have done? I don't know. I'm glad that they added the violence. Maybe. Oh, okay. Here's what's actually, I'm actually going to tie it into a point that I noticed immediately, which is that, dude, the fight scenes here, as cool as they are on the surface, man, they leave me wanting more. They really did leave me wanting more because they cut so freaking much, dude. They cut so much.
Yeah.
And if Joe was here, he probably would have been his first point. And he would absolutely be railing against this as much as I am. Now, of course, I'm not a fight coordinator. I don't freaking know really what I'm talking about, but I can feel this. And once you begin to notice this, it's going to bother you till the end of time. And I'm not saying I need like a 20-minute uncut single take, action sequence. That's whatever. I'm not asking for the stars and the moon, but dude, that first fight alone and every subsequent fight, they are cutting on every freaking punch, it seems like. And it is so annoying and so sad because how cool could it have been where, okay, maybe this movie didn't really have a lot going for it in its story department, a little bland, a little generic. You get some cool wink wink moments here where it's like, Kano wins or flawless victory or whatever. Yeah, sure. That's very fleeting. But man, if like the choreography here was really actually honestly the choreography I think was pretty entertaining if they just like stuck with it. Right, if they didn't butcher it in post, or like I think a lot of cool stuff got left on the cutting room floor, just Frankenstein to hell in the editing bay. What the hell happened? Steve, did you notice this?
I hear what you're saying. I wish I could remember the film critic that brought this up, but he even said too, I read him and he said that like what this movie needed, and it's no disrespect to Simon McQuoid, this movie needed a more accomplished director behind the camera. I think it needed somebody who had a little bit more of a skill and a little bit more of an aptitude. Even in the editing bay, because no, there's a lot of cuts here. There's a lot of cuts that seems to obscure like shaky videography or uncertain videography or camera placement. There's a lot of weirdness going on in some of the battle scenes. And like, I mean, in some aspects, I was maybe a little bit more distracted by the gore and just the abundance of bloodshed to really care. But you're totally right, though. That is another point. The fight sequences are welcomed, but they're not especially great.
If you give this to like a stunt coordinator, because Simon McQuoid, I don't know if you mentioned this or not, but it basically just directs commercials, which I don't mean to put him down. It's a good profession. It's good money, and there are some damn good commercials out there. But yeah, if you had given this movie to like a stunt coordinator, a specific stunt coordinator director, who's the person that did Extraction, right? Where stunt like there's a lot of
oh yeah, there's
a
that's
lot
a good
of,
one.
There's a lot of stunt people that are starting to get behind in the director's seat. And honestly, I am all for that. Maybe, yeah, their stories are bland or generic or whatever. But dude, if you can get me that action sequence that blows my mind or that leaves me wanting more or that, at the very least will hold up well in a YouTube clip 7 years from now or something, it's like, damn, you have made something really worthwhile here. And I'm glad that you did that.
I had to look up his name. It's not the guy who did Extraction.
Sure.
You know who I think would have done this movie pretty well is David Leitch. That's the guy who did Deadpool 2 and Atomic Blonde.
Oh,
he's a stunt performer.
Yes,
and he did Hobbs and Shaw, which I didn't see, but I can imagine this guy. I just think back to Atomic Blonde and
yes,
Deadpool
I love that
2.
movie.
That's a guy.
I'm sorry. I love the fights
style
in there. I love the fights and the violence in Atomic Blonde. Lot to be desired, not me, lot to be desired, but I actually had some issues with it. I actually forget where I stood on that movie. I need to watch it again. But those fights, yeah, that is the best thing to come out of that movie was the fighting, in my opinion.
Easily.
It was damn good. And Charlize Theron kicking ass like she always does. That's the Furiosa sequel. That
he would have been an interesting person, David Leitch. He would have been an interesting person,
yeah,
to direct this movie.